Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm here with the Ryans, aka Apollonaut and Luna.
Oh yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, we were supposed to have famous Hippo as well, but he was feeling under the weather this morning, so he decided that he just didn't want to have to I think do a bunch of talking when he's not feeling very good. So he's going to be dropped out for the presentation, but we still got like I said, Apollonaut and Luna here to talk through the session zero stuff. As usual, you can post your questions as we go or comments or whatever you want to do in the special events text channel, which is directly above us in Discord. If you're watching on Twitch, you can also post questions there or comments or whatever. And then if there's a good moment, I will jump in and read those off from Twitch. Um, and like usual as well, it's streaming on Twitch. We'll get a VOD on YouTube, so if you want to check back later, if something you want to look into again or whatever, or find a screenshot or something or whatever, that will be on YouTube. So just keep an eye out for that. And I believe that's everything. So yeah, without further ado, Paula, Luna, feel free to take it away.
Sure. So, you've decided to run a game of Dungeons and Dragons. Perhaps never run a game before. I'm gonna put the voice aside. Maybe I can come back to voices. But when you want to run a game, the first step is getting your friends together and agreeing to play the game. We on this server talk about Dungeons and Dragons, mainly 5th edition D&D. However, the session zero kind of concept is kind of ubiquitous among all of the other RPGs out there. Almost all of them. If you've played any kind of computer game RPG where you have to create a character, you have a sense for kind of the beginnings of what goes on to prepare for a campaign to begin. As a DM, it can be pretty terrifying to suddenly have all of your friends in one place together at the same time. By the miracle of the scheduling gods, you have everybody together at the same time in the same place. You go, okay, what do we do now? We've got these books. Maybe we've got some online resources. We have D&D Beyond. And what do we do? Well, some of the easy questions to answer there are, do we make characters? Obviously, in order to play the game, you need a dungeon master and player characters. So we establish who's going to be the DM, and we establish what characters people are going to play. So there are a lot of different steps that happen naturally, even if somebody isn't aware of what a session zero is, or all these steps that are kind of curated. Right? I've curated a whole bunch of steps here. I'm going to go through a lot of them, or pretty much all of them. Even without this guide, people are still able to run campaigns. So don't feel bad about not using all of the things that are going to be mentioned, because not all of them are going to be perfect for you and your group. However, if you do follow these steps, we're going to kind of lay out today, your session zero will enable you to have a better campaign, because you'll have more information about what your players expect out of the campaign. You'll have more detail for the characters that are playing. Not just going to be some numbers on a page. They're going to be characters that exist in your game setting, in your world. It's much easier to tell a story with characters that have personalities than it is to tell a story with sheets of paper with numbers on them. So, session zero involves a few kind of main steps, right? Rolling up characters, figuring out what kind of class, race you're going to play. You might talk about play styles. Does somebody really like combat? Does somebody really like role play? Where's that compromise? What is the DM going to be able to run? What do they feel comfortable running? What level are you going to start at? Every table is different. Every DM is different. Every session 0, even with the same DM, is going to be different. The steps that we're going to lay out are going to give you a basis for making your campaigns great. So I'm going to be pulling from a whole bunch of different sources of information here during this. I have some blogs that I'm pulling info from. I have Reddit. I have my own lists. I have my website. I run the D&D Compendium Resources website. It's in the resources posts in this Discord. dnd-compendium.com. We're going to be mainly looking at the DMing tips page is going to be where I'm pulling stuff from, if I am pulling anything from my website. There's a lot there for dungeon masters starting to learn the game. There is a section on starting a new homebrew campaign. And then I also have tons of guides for starting official modules. So I'm going to talk about official modules later. These are campaign books like Ghosts of Saltmarsh, or Tomb of Annihilation, or Curse of Strahd, or Storm King's Thunder, Rise of Tiamat. These are campaign books that are published by Wizards of the Coast, and they have their own kind of sets of introductions in the first few pages of the adventure module that will help you on top of I'm going to go through today. Today is going to be focused around homebrew campaigns, designing a campaign for your players to enjoy all together. Okay. Luna, do you have anything to add here?
No, I think you've knocked it out of the park there. Like we're like you said, we're focusing on session 0 today, and people might like. I don't know. I've been playing long enough that when I hear session 0, I immediately know what that is, and it's pretty. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but it might not be to everybody. So I think having that, like explaining what the session 0 is a good idea. So, or maybe you've done that. I'm sorry, I'm still waking up a little bit.
That's all right. All right, we'll just power through.
Yeah, power through.
Let me know when you want to hop in. So.
Yeah, of course.
So session 0, like the term itself, kind of refers to a session that occurs before your campaign officially starts. A lot of programmers like to use kind of 0 as the first element in an array or a list. We start our lists with 0 and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So the very top item on the list is like this first thing that we have to do. Again, making characters, introducing the setting to the players. I'm going to cover determining house or homebrew rulings. A lot of DMs have some special rules they like to bring in. I'll mention about character sheets, whether you should use full custom character sheets or pre-made characters. We'll talk about something that's incredibly important that I haven't mentioned yet, and that is support tools, making sure that all of your players are comfortable at your table. We'll get quite a bit of conversation around that, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. This is something that it has recently become more of the forefront of inclusive gaming, making sure that everyone's welcome at your table, and that people are there to have fun. Okay. So for the DM, we have a job. Our job is to determine what world the players are going to be playing in, their characters. We determine things about the world regarding the existence of magic. Is our world a high magic area? Are there lots of mages and clerics and people who can use magic? Or is it a really rare thing? Are you going to find like one mage in a city? Determine all of these things. There's a whole slew of heavy details that we can choose to involve. We can let our players know about those things so that they can start designing their characters' backstories to involve some of that detail. So you determine your desired feel for the world. How gritty is it? Is it going to be this? Is it going to be really difficult to heal? Your level of technology. Do you have guns in your world? What is the setting like? Is it all just wilderness? Are there small villages? Are there cities? Are you in space? Well, could be anything. Once you have this whole kind of setting idea in mind that you are giving to the players to put their characters into, then you should decide on a starting location for the players. You say, here is where you are going to be when we start the adventure. The first minute of, right, your characters are all in this location, and this happens. What are you going to do about it? There's that kind of classic, we're in a tavern, everybody's around a table, and okay, go roleplay. That's kind of cliche. And for DMs who don't really know any better, is kind of acceptable sometimes. Here I want to show you how there's, so many more options for this, better options. Kind of session 1, where to go with that later. We're here about session 0.
I have a few comments to make, if you mind, sure. And then a question I'm going to pose to you. First of all, I think you should, unless you're a really experienced DM and you do a lot of improv, I think you should probably come to session 0 having most of your world building done already, or at the very least have enough that you can actually start the campaign and tell your players. Like when you get to session 0, I think if you have a world in mind, session 0 would be when you tell your players about the setting and what to expect when they go into it.
Definitely.
And I have a question for you.
Sure.
I think I already know how I would answer this question, but how much of the player's input do you want when you're building a world? It can be, I think it can vary from DM to DM, from campaign to campaign, but how important do you think it is that the players have input when you're building a campaign world?
That is a very good question. For players to involve themselves in the world building means that they are more invested in the world. They care more about playing in it, so it can benefit everybody for the players to involve themselves in the world building a little bit. I think the extent to which I usually have my players help me world build is with their direct, their characters' relationships with people and family. There's a section of Xanathar's Guide that is called "This Is Your Life," and in it there are kind of options. They're not rules; they're options and extensions of rules for building out characters' family and their relationships. Maybe they had a mentor. Maybe they had acquaintance. Maybe they met an adventurer, maybe a retired adventurer. When you roll up a character, you can determine, who are their parents? Are they alive? What do the parents do? Do they have occupations? Does the character have siblings? And so this world building involves, it kind of plants the character and puts roots down in the setting. And I'll talk about this later. I have a lot about backstory that is important. I feel like there's some other topics here that are going to kind of take precedence before we get there. That's at the bottom of my session 0, because that's kind of at the end after you've built characters. You start putting backstory on them to build the setting more so that you can then prep a session 1.
Mm-hmm. I personally haven't ever if I was ever going to do like player involved world building, I would do something like you ever heard of Microscope?
Vaguely.
So
there are some tools out there,
yeah,
and little mini games.
Yeah, like Microscope is a board game where it's sort of like a world building RPG. No one's really a DM, and you all kind of you build a world together, make events, locations, and put them on a timeline, and then you can use that to build up a world, and then your DM takes the information and refines it and makes an actual setting to play in. I think that's a little more advanced, personally. If you could, but I agree with what you said earlier, though. If your players come to this world, then the most involvement that I would expect most players to have is implementing, like, fitting their characters into the world. Not so much like building the world themselves, but building the influence their character has on it.
Exactly.
I guess you could say.
Yeah, well put.
Obviously, we'll come back to this, and I do have examples from my own homebrew campaign that I can bring up. But that's
perfect.
absolutely that gets more into the character creation part of the session 0.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. Sweet. Sam, did you have any commentary on this?
The only thing I was thinking is there might be an element to consider, which is like the DM, in my opinion, matters too. So like if your players want to go in a totally different direction that you want to go into, like that's cool, but you should also, you know, want to do that as well or be passionate, because I think you also don't want to be committing yourself to like many months of work building a world that you're not really that interested or passionate in. I think that's maybe an important piece of it as well. So maybe then you have to work out a compromise, right, where you maybe let your players know that and you find a way to make it work for everybody.
Mm-hmm. It's something that I did when I did my last homebrew game, or I guess second to one of my homebrew games, my most recent ones. I kind of had a world in mind that I was going to have all the players in, and then I let them decide. But I didn't come to the table saying like, this is the world, this is the adventure we're going to have in it. I gave them a list of different adventures that they could have in it. All of them like totally different, very varied, to have them starting in completely different parts of the world. One of them happened to be a sandbox, which is what they chose. But of those 4 options, that would completely change the tone of the game, completely change how they it would change where they start, it would change how they interact with the world, it would shift their backstories. Trying to think of what they were. It's been so long. I think I had one where they would have started out, it would have been like a diplomacy mission gone wrong, like there's a banquet and everyone's poisoned and everyone wakes up from unconsciousness as like the dead bodies or unconscious bodies are being lifted up and pilfered through, and that would have been a very political roleplay heavy game. Another one where so cliche now that I say it, but it was going to start with a prison escape. They were in a mine, and everyone had to be like magic users of some kind, taking the magic initiative feat if they could, and they all had these shackles on them that hindered their magic capability. And then the whole thing would have been break out of prison and getting out of this country and like fleeing like convicts, which would have been a completely, tonally different game.
Right.
So I think if you're gonna, I like to give players choices because not everybody is interested in the same thing. I know we're talking about homebrew games, but if I showed up to my session 0 and the DM said, okay, now we're going to be playing Rise of Tiamat, I would check out, personally. Opinion, I don't like Rise of Tiamat, I don't like the Tyranny of Dragons, and if the DM said this is what we're playing, I would say, could we maybe not? So I would like to, I as a player would like to have a choice, and I as a DM would like to give my players some input in what we're doing as well.
Speaking on,
sorry, I'm done.
Okay, yeah. Speaking on player expectations, what your players want to play, and reflecting off of Sam saying, the DM is also important. The DM has an idea of what they want to run. All of that needs to be kind of brought in and taken into account when you're preparing a setting. You want all of your players to want to be engaged from, hopefully session 0, but for sure session 1 onwards. And the more you can do as a DM to help them fit their characters into your world, and then make it a world that you want to run as well, means that ultimately everything is going to be smoother, easier to prep, easier to run, and more fun to play in. Something going off of this is that there are different kinds of players, and they're kind of like, people have assigned them kind of psychological categories about different versions of players. Like there's the engineer, where you like using the rules and the game mechanics to overcome difficult scenarios. You enjoy solving tactical problems, optimizing effectiveness, and making plans. These are kind of power gamers. And there's the storyteller. You like exploring the world, you like talking to characters, you like engaging in the story, and you want the story to be dramatically plausible. You have a good sense of your characters' motives and feelings, and you enjoy role-playing. Making a good story is the most important to you. You dislike when the rules disrupt the story. And there's the listener, where you like just being a wallflower. You like being there, not really participating 100%. This is kind of the movie watcher. You enjoy watching the game unfold around you. Enjoying the company of being with friends while, slaying orcs and stealing gold. That's fun. You prefer taking part in the action rather than the dialogue. You don't really like speaking in character. These are all valid types of players. There's not necessarily a better player type. One of these other ones is inventor. You like doing fantastic, unexpected things in the world. In a game of make-believe, what is fun and exciting is more important than what is logical. You prefer to explore the oddities the game allows, rather than engage in moral dilemmas or political intrigue. So, there's some people want a silly game. They want to be able to have a fantasy world where fantasy things happen, and not really have to deal with real world moral dilemmas in character. And for some people that can be kind of cathartic. For others, they just want to have fun and just be silly, be with their friends. They're all valid types of play. So there's a handout here that I'm going to link in the special events text. This is the session 0 handout for players. They get to read it and see some of these vocabulary terms, and they can kind of figure out where they might fit on that spectrum. And they can outline to the DM what level of deadliness do I want to play in? What level of realism do I want the resource management system to be? Do I want to have to go chase after every single arrow that I fire? Is the DM going to allow character conflict? Are you going to PvP, player versus player, with other people in the party? What's going to happen there? And then the second page of it is a place for the player to write down stuff about their character. It gives a space for background, has a space for their character's greatest desire, a space for their a character's secret wish. It has a fear, something that their character is openly afraid of, and something that their character secretly fears. Then one space for a regret for their character. Even with these, an open desire and a secret desire, open fear and a secret fear, and a regret, suddenly gives their character so much more depth and numbers on a page. We'll come back to this. I have a whole bunch of stuff. I love talking about it. I could go on for another hour, but I need to get through some of these mechanics of the session 0. One of the most important things for session 0, in my opinion, is discussing boundaries. It is number 1 on my list of the running session 0 with your players thing that I wrote out in preparation for this. That was the first thing I wrote, was discuss boundaries and table rules. Some people have things that they don't want coming up in a fantasy campaign. They don't want to deal with grisly, gory things. They don't want to deal with like really difficult moral dilemmas. They don't want to deal with triggering situations or things that could bring up their own trauma. There are some tools out there for people to use in RPG campaigns. There's something called the X card. There's also something called lines and veils. I'm going to briefly go over kind of both of those. Let me pull up what the X card is. Let's see. This is a tool to help assert boundaries in content or behavior. This is a kind of a group tool. When you're playing online, you can just send the cross mark emoji in the chat. You can say as a DM, hey, at any moment in the campaign, if you direct message me, it's kind of X. Like, we're gonna pause, and we can, like, if you send me that X, we know, or I know as the DM, that a boundary has been crossed or is about to be crossed. And this is a way for a player to say, hey, can we stop here? This is making me uncomfortable. That's incredibly powerful and important, because sometimes we're not really aware of what boundaries people have. Maybe we talk about some things that we as a group agree to. Maybe sometimes people don't feel comfortable talking about the things that feed their trauma, which is entirely fine. And if you have a way, if you give your players and yourself, even if a player is saying something that you're uncomfortable with, a way to kind of say, hey, we're going to stop our game, take a step back, maybe we'll rewind and undo something. Maybe we'll address the issue and talk about it as a group. How do we feel as a group about this? Without calling out the person who sent the cross. That's a whole other thing. You don't want to call out the person for of stopping the group's fun, but you need to address it to the group. I've thankfully never had to implement. No, I've implemented them, but I've never used them. It's because having the knowledge as a group, as players and a DM, that if anybody ever approaches the point where a boundary is going to be crossed, we can maturely address the issue as a group, figure out how to move forward. That requires a level of maturity. That sometimes it's kind of hard to pull out of what could be a silly, funny situation, and having to step away from that for a moment. Be like, okay, hey guys, hey everybody, we're gonna pause and we're gonna change the situation a little bit. There's something called the script change, which is that rewind to redo a bit, or you pause to allow a break in the action, or you fast forward to skip over a segment. Kind of changing the script in the middle of the gameplay. You're like, hey, I don't like how that turned out. Make me feel really uncomfortable. Can we redo that? Maybe can we skip over it? So I have friends that have been part of groups where they didn't have support tools. And I was talking with them and they felt extremely uncomfortable in some situations. I don't know how much detail I want to go into, but there's, these are important. The reason it's my number one. I always start my session zeros now with this talk about boundaries. There's a whole bunch of different ways to discuss them as groups. There's a Google form that was made. It's the RPG consent checklist. Some people think it's extremely excessive, the amount of things that are on it. I say that the more inclusive you are, the more comfortable your players will be. Even if you end up not needing to address anything, that's the whole idea, right? If you never have to address something because it didn't come up, because you talked about it beforehand, that's much better having somebody have a boundary be crossed and then be hurt about it, leave the group. Or, the whole thing here is that you want your players to have fun. You want you to have fun. That's like number one. We're playing a fantasy game. Okay. Please ask questions about this. They're going to be here. I'll post a link in the chat to my accessibility and inclusion page on here. Talks about the safety tools. There's a primer on safety in RPGs, support tools compilations. Talks about inclusive gaming. Even physical and cognitive accommodations. I have had to run a indie game with autistic people or people with Asperger's, and the way they process things is different. Neurodiversity is a thing, and understanding where they're coming from and how they process things will help you have fun. I've also had people with dyslexia, which is more common. Haven't had to run any games for blind people, but Braille dice do exist. I think it's really neat. There's a list of table rules that I bring out for people who are joining my table. At the moment, it is 5 pages. 5 pages, double spaced. On my list of boundaries, I'll give you examples. Here, I'll post my group expectations here in special events text as well. Number 1, misogyny, the objectification of women, especially players and player characters, as well as homophobia and transphobia, has no place at my table. I treat players equally at the table, and I expect you to do the same. Don't tell anyone at my table what to do on their turn unless they ask for help or suggestions. They might know the rules better than you. Rape, animal abuse, and torture are not allowed under any circumstances. I will not roleplay anything of the sort, and it will never be welcome at my table. I personally, as a DM, I say you are free as players to visit houses of ill repute. Gambling dens, pit fighting arenas, brothels. They exist in my world. There might be plot hooks there. There might be information to gather from the characters there, but there might also be consequences going there. For me, again, I will not describe sex acts. I will fade to black and move on to the next thing. I do sometimes pull from a list of diseases as well. I personally, as a DM, I will not roleplay romantic relationships between NPCs and characters. I want to be flirting with you, DM to player, or player to DM. That makes me uncomfortable. NPCs will not seek out player characters for explicit activity. Another one that's really simple here, really powerful. Stop if someone asks you to. Let that kind of speak for itself. And then this last one, at any time, you can call a timeout, and we can pause play to assess the situation. So those kind of 8 boundaries for me as a DM, I would hope existed at any table where I was a player. I would want the DM to also agree to these, or some modification of these. Because these are some things that would make me uncomfortable if they were not followed. All right. So that's all really heavy. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd also like to bring up that these things can be. I'm thinking of the one game that I'm hopefully will be running once lockdown ends. And this table, it's 3 of my players are good friends of mine. I've known them for several years, but 2 of them are people who I don't know. And then another game that I'm running is with 4 of my very closest friends. And in both of those games, I absolutely implement boundaries and safety tools. Like, it doesn't matter how long you've known your players. In the one game with my 4 close friends, it's Curse of Strahd, which comes with a content warning. And not only that, but I checked in with my players and asked them if it was okay if I kind of amped it up a little more. We set boundaries, and even though we're all adults, we're mature, we respect each other, and I absolutely trust anyone to tell me if anything is making them too uncomfortable. I still implemented safety tools. I use popsicle sticks. They function basically the same way to the X and O cards. But just because I trust them to speak up if something's making them uncomfortable doesn't mean that implementing the safety tools for them isn't a bad idea. And also like I said, we use popsicle sticks, and we have like a red one we hold up now represents an X card. We didn't talk about the O card yet. It's like the opposite of the X card, basically. From my understanding, if you have an O card on the table, you put your finger on it when the scene is going somewhere that you really like and you want to see more of it. And that's represented by a green popsicle stick. And also don't forget that it's important for the DM to be safe as well. Like, I know, like, you implemented your list of boundaries and lines that you don't cross. and that makes the players safe, but also makes you safe as well.
Right.
Like I have my own set of sticks, and I can put them up if I think we're going somewhere that I don't want to be going.
Right.
I think I've been a DM for so long. I kind of I sometimes I forget that I'm a player at the table too. It's easy for me to forget that. I take my role as the DM as like a service to the players, I guess you could say, and it's easy for me to forget that I am also a person at this table with boundaries that I don't want to cross. So,
100%. 100%. Yeah.
We've been talking a lot about like when you put up your boundaries, there's a lot of I will not, I will not, I will not, and those sound a lot like lines to me, which are good. Like lines are important, but it's also some things the players are okay with, or use the DMs are okay with, like there being mention of, but like you said, you fade to black, and I think you call those veils, right?
Yes. So I mentioned the X card and lines and veils. It seems like you're familiar with this term as well.
Yeah, I was actually looking.
Lines.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was looking through Tasha's Culture of Everything because, oh my god, the book is amazing. And it has a little blurb about talking about Session 0. I don't have it on me, otherwise I'd be bringing it up, but I looked through it. It's basically like a light version of what we're talking about now. And that book also mentions it doesn't call it lines and veils. It calls them hard boundaries and soft boundaries. But it's basically the same thing. A hard boundary or a line, you do not cross it. You avoid approaching it.
I got it here. Hard and soft limits.
Thank you. And so yeah, like a hard limit is no. It's a flat no, not even mentioned at the table. A soft limit or a veil could be you mention it, but you don't role play it out. You don't describe it. You just say it happens and leave it there.
Sure. That's Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, page 140.
Thank you. I thought I didn't think about getting my book until after I sat down and got comfortable. I don't want to get up now.
That's all right. I have it pulled up here digitally. But yes, hard and soft limits. A soft limit is a threshold that one should think twice about crossing, as it is likely to create genuine anxiety, fear, and discomfort. A hard limit is a threshold that should never be crossed. Every member is able to give their own hard and soft limits. And as long as everyone knows what they are, everybody can have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, communication.
So all of that heavy stuff out of the way. Incredibly, yeah.
Heavy stuff out of the way. Moving on. What's next?
Yeah. After talking about boundaries and my expectations for the players, behavior-wise, talk about like rolling dice and how I expect them to roll dice when I ask them to, instead of saying, I do this and I roll for it. It's like, no, you describe what you want to do, and then I, as the DM, can request a roll from you. You don't just get to roll. So I run my games. I define all of that. That's in the table, the online group expectations document I put in there. And role playing, it's like, hey, don't hide any information from the DM. You can choose to keep secrets from other players, sure. Don't hide anything from the DM, because we control the world. The world needs to be able to respond and react to the players and their existence in the world. I talk about metagaming, hogging the spotlight, being polite when it's another person's turn to speak. Reminding the DM about something important for the story if it happens. Don't be an edgelord and make a character that does not mesh with the party at all. I talk about, how we're going to handle experience. Are we going to level up when I say so, or are we going to level up when I give you experience for encounters? That's a decision the DM has to make. The expectation for combat, it's like, well, you don't have to fight everything DM puts in front of the players. And expectations for the players, like, hey, if it is your turn in combat, I expect you to be at least a little bit ready. You're not staring at your phone on Facebook when it comes to your turn in combat. I have a list of actions. There's actually, in the player resources channel on this Discord, there's the combat reference PDF I posted like the other day about what players can do on their turn. I talk about loot. Maybe I'll roll on tables. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll homebrew my own loot. All of these are decisions the DM has to make. We talked about the world building involved before the campaign starts. You can have a setting ready and still not really have an idea for what you want to do with the campaign, which is completely fine. This is where it can be fun in a session 0 to talk with your players about what kind of genres excite them. Do the players want to take part in heists? Do they want to be sneaky and go and steal items from the rich lord's manor? They want to do a dungeon crawl. They want to go monster hunting and just kill fantastic beasts because they're really cool and have neat abilities. Do they want to take part in a political intrigue campaign, maybe a murder mystery? Do they want horror? Or do they all just want to feel like heroes and have this kind of hero's journey epic story unfold? Maybe you want to run epic battles between two warring countries and you want the players to involve themselves in the battles somehow. These are all different, like entirely different feels for a campaign. And if you talk about them in a session 0, you as the DM can determine, where you want to start and where you want to go. If you have a long enough campaign, you can do all of those. By the way, you're not beholden to one type. And you can see, like, if you as a group determine, like, all right, we want to play a dungeon crawl, and then you have 0 experience running a dungeon, but you feel like you want to try it. That might be a little bit of a bumpy experience. You'll get experience running a dungeon crawl for your players. And if it's really not going well, maybe you're in like this mega dungeon and your party's tired of it, and you're kind of tired of it, you can absolutely switch the genre. You can say, all right, time skip, going back to the city. We're going to start something new. That's totally fine. I've done that myself a few times. Like, hey, this isn't really working out for our group, and we're not like enjoying this experience that we're doing right now, and maybe let's change the scene, see how that feels. But it's good to know, like, as a group, what you want to start with, that you can prep a session 1. The next thing for that, that's kind of related, is determining starting level. You're not going to have players fighting gods at level 1.
You're not? I've been running D&D Ron my entire life.
Well, at that point, it's the gods just kind of toying with mortals.
That was a joke. I am joking. I don't put gods in my place level 1. Unless they're all clerics. Then they can handle it.
True. Kind of. Yeah. So you want to take into account the player's level of game knowledge. You don't want to start new players at any level higher than 4. My recommendation. If you as a DM are new, and this is your first session 0, I would recommend probably starting at level 1, maybe even level 2. Level 1, it's really easy to just straight up kill a character. like a goblin crossbow attack, just die. Wizard will have like 7 health, and you do 7 damage with crossbow, and then suddenly they're dead. Well, that's not the most fun for the players. And if you spend all this time building characters and building a backstory, and then session 1 they fight a goblin and they die, it all just goes up in smoke. For some people, that's fun. Some people, they like making 4 or 5 characters and then going, all right, let's get the next one. For Tomb of Annihilation,
old
which
school
is kind
way
of
to
known as
play.
yeah, that too. For Tomb of Annihilation, which I actually run the DMs Discord server for, it's one of my favorite adventures, is known as kind of a meat grinder. When I start a Tomb of Annihilation campaign, I say, all right, everybody make 3 characters. Because your character is going to die.
That way as well. Yeah, the Death House in Curse of Strahd is a TPK grinder. That and the Old Bone Grinder as well, which combat encounter immediately after Death House. Those are 2 of the most deadly parts of Curse of Strahd. Amber Temple coming up as number 3. But
Definitely.
yeah, the Death House, you walk in level 1 and you get to level 2 and you go in the basement and you fight like 5 shadows, 4 specters, and a shambling mound. Not all at once,
spoilers.
but sorry.
Yes, so yeah, you don't want to throw your characters into a meat grinder that they're not expecting. It feels bad to kill a character in session 1. It might not be your fault. Maybe you rolled a critical hit and then they just die. That totally happens all the time. It feels bad. So you usually end up rewinding. You're like, all right, let's re-roll that. Maybe he misses instead. That's where the DM has some license to fudge dice rolls and be like, yeah, does a 12 hit instead of the nat 20 that you rolled on the die? If the players want to feel like heroes, it kind of kills that when their character dies from single hit. So yeah, starting level also determines their kind of power level and affects what kind of monsters and encounters you can throw at the players. We can have an entire other workshop on level 1 gameplay. What monsters to throw at the players, what situations to give them that are not going to kill them. But then also, if you're an experienced DM, you might not want to start at level 1. Maybe your players have gone through a few other campaigns and they're like, nah, level 1 is boring. We want to start at like level 5. You go, okay. Then you got to up the stakes on their influence on the world. Level 5 adventurer has been around the town, been around the city. Might have some connections. You're world building even more now. Level 1 characters have fewer connections. Going on about characters, speaking about character sheets specifically, you have kind of 2 main options for character sheets for players. In a session 0, this is one of the things that takes the most time, I think, for new players, new DMs, is, hey, let's all make characters. You whip out your basic rules, your player handbook, and you go, okay, well, here's the steps for building a character. Let's choose a race. Let's choose a class. Let's choose a subclass if we have to. Then you're reading pages. And you're trying to make decisions. You're writing things down. This is the old pen and paper style. Nowadays, we have things like D&D Beyond's Character Builder. It has a little option where you go, okay, I'm playing this race, this class, okay, go. It like fills everything out for you. That's great. Want to just get started? Go ahead. I guess there's kind of 3 options. There's that like full custom where you make all of the decisions really minutely. You roll for stats. You put the stats where you want them. Pick your race. You pick your class. Write them all down. It's all fully custom. It takes a long time. You have put all of your hard work into that character. Then there's the quick builds. You make some decisions and it does the rest for you. Or there's completely pre-made characters. Entire sheets that are all made for you, and you just pick one. Totally
I
all
ran
options.
last week, just as an example, or was it 2 weeks ago? I think it was 2 weeks ago. I ran a level 7 one-shot for my friends because we're in lockdown. My in-person games are on hold, and we kind of would rather be playing the main game in person. And I was like, okay, we've all been at level 5. It's kind of boring. I want to do level 7, but some of my players aren't. I know that some of my players are really experienced. They've been up to level 10 and beyond, probably. But a couple of my players were also like, they were kind of newish. They were the ones that needed a guiding hand getting them through character creation. So I was like, okay, you can come to the table with a character that you built if you want. But especially because this is level 7 and it's only a one-shot, I made 6 level 7 characters as just pre-gens, and I handed them out and I said, you can pick from one of these if you like. I think pre-gen characters are really good for one-shots because you can look at, and if you say like, okay, that's pretty interesting, and you play it for a session or two, and then you say, well, that was fun. I don't think I'll ever play a wizard again, though it's not my thing. Now you haven't dedicated yourself to a campaign as a wizard, only to realize 2 sessions in that, oh, maybe I don't want to play a wizard, and then you have to change everything.
Yeah, that's
and
a hard lesson.
And for new players as well. Like I'm thinking like young players might be beneficial to like dip their feet in the water kind of thing. Give them pre-gen simple characters, like, give the 10-year-old a champion fighter at level 1.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
Right.
Yeah, that's
going off of
my
your definitely, yeah. Pre-gen characters are great for one-shots and for people to figure out how a class works at a fundamental level without dedicating themselves to a campaign with that character. An idea that I've heard that works really well for world building and campaigns in general is to start your campaign with your friends with a one-shot in the game world at a different period of time that can help inform the lore and the history of your game world. Maybe the players, this works really well for experienced players. Maybe you have level 15 heroic adventurers that were part of some epic battle 200 years ago. You role play that with your characters, with your players at the table, and the outcome of the battle is going to be built into the lore of your world. Then when you start your campaign at level 1, level 2, their new characters at level 1 or 2 are part of the world that is affected by the decisions that they made with those other characters for that one shot. I think that's a lot of fun. And that involves like them more building. Something else here, kind of going off of that even, is a lot of DMs want to just jump in and run a campaign. Like, okay, well, I got my friends together. We just want to play the game and get started. We're going to build characters. We're going to spend hours putting backstory on these characters. Then you want to fit into the world. That can all backfire in the second round of combat when your character dies. So being able to give the players a chance to involve themselves in the world building, so that they care about the world, even if their character is dead. Help them have more fun, even like making a second character just to carry on the legacy of their first character. I have seen the funniest things that I witnessed at a table in person was somebody's character died. Then DM was like, "Oh, I guess you're gonna have to roll a new character." And the kid, he's probably 13, writes Junior. Says, "All right, I have a new character."
I'm here to avenge my parents.
Yep.
That's adorable.
Yep. So,
so
the
bringing it back to, sorry, I don't know if like it seems like we're going on a bit of a tangent here, away from the main point, which was like session 0, building characters. Let's get back on that, so to speak.
Sure. So the characters exist in the world. You've had them. You've started to help them understand the world that they're going to be playing in, and you've decided on a starting location. Now you have to find a reason for the players to be in the starting location. That's preparing for session 1. You know, are they hired for a job? What is their previous history with each other? Do they know each other? Are they friends? Are they all starting in prison? They have to escape, right? All of these ideas for session 1. If you decide as a group where they're going to be starting, that can help them get into the mindset for their character's motivations. And then kind of leading into backstory. This is another huge section. This is part 8 in my session 0 document here. It says, work with your players to add backstory to their characters so that they may fit better into your world. Each character should have at least one primary motivation. What drives plot is motivation. Because motivation drives action. So motivation drives action, and action drives plot. If the character is just reacting to everything around them in random ways, some people like to call themselves, "Oh, I'm chaotic neutral." They think that chaotic means literally chaos and lol random. Chaos in the kind of traditional alignment chart is kind of anti-authority. Like not ordered, not under the kind of heavy hand of the law. Not like I react randomly to everything around me in unpredictable ways. It's not a very in-depth character. It's just a ball of chaos that causes trouble. Sometimes it can be fun. It's entertaining. You might see some podcasts or playcasts or people on Twitch streaming, and then at least one character is just going to be, you know, the comic relief. It's fine. It's just really hard to run a game for. To have kind of a direction for the game when somebody keeps derailing everything. For backstory, I have some recommendations for tools and places to look for inspiration for character backstories. There is the This Is Your Life section in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, where it allows you to roll for number of siblings. You know, what happened to your parents? It has a table that's like 80% chance that your parents that you know who your parents are, that they are alive. Because I think it's kind of a cliche that every adventurer is like, well, my parents are dead, I'm an orphan, I'm going to go adventure because I have, nothing better to do. This provides the character a set of roots into the world instead of that, and gives them some other things that they can have motivations off of. Maybe they have to help a family business. Maybe they have a grudge against their parents or their family. Maybe they owe their family something. That can be a tie to the world that the DM can use. The DM gains some strings to pull with the player character that can really bring the player's emotions into the story and provide for better roleplay.
I was about to bring that up when I mentioned this when we were talking about world building. When I started my sandbox game with my players, I asked them what they want to play. They said sandbox, and I said, "Well, great. Sandbox is really loose. Like your motivation could literally be anything." So I asked my players when they were coming up with their backstory to come up with like not only just a reason that they're out adventuring, but something that I think the vocabulary I used was like I could pull things from their backstory and turn into quests for them down the line that are personal, tailored to them. So some examples from what my players gave me. I have a barbarian. He went path of the totem warrior, chose bear totem first. He comes from a clan of lycanthropes, shapeshifters, werewolves sort of thing. He is a werebear, and his clan was wiped out by a hunting organization. He doesn't know why they did this. He's slowly figuring it out and plotting against them, trying to like prove that these are like actually like super awful people, and he's trying to take them down and avenge his clan. And that's why he's out adventuring. He's not really an outcast or an exile from his clan. He's just trying to get away from the people who are hunting him down and become strong enough that he can avenge his clan. Another example is dwarf cleric of Mistra. She comes from a far-off land, orphaned, fled the land, came here, and was raised by an elven smith. And when she came of age and she got kind of, antsy, like she learned how to. He taught her how to smith, make magic items, and when she was ready to, fly out of the nest, so to speak, he asked her to find 3 magic items that he made and take them from their owners and do whatever you want with them. Basically, just he didn't tell her. He told her what the items were in vague details, like he said a wand, a sword, and a ring, and he gave her names of people who have them, not what they did, what he gave them to her for, not why he wants her to go find them. She left that up for me to decide. But those are just like some examples of these are built-in motivations for going out into the world, and there's something that I can pull from it. I engineered those things from my players. Like I asked them specifically to make these for me, and when the barbarian player said, "Well, what if I was like from like a clan or something?" I jumped on that and I helped him say, okay, well, what if you're? He said, like, what if I'm from like a wiped out clan? And I said, okay, well, you don't know who wiped out your clan. I do, of course. And you're going out there to become stronger and avenge your clan. And he said, oh, I like that. Okay. And then I've been drip feeding him information about who's hunting him now and who he will be hunting when he becomes strong enough.
There is a Reddit post from 3 years ago where this author details something he calls knife theory. He says they're called knives because the players lovingly forge them and present them to the DM so that the DM can use them to stab the player over and over again. This is... It's meant to be taken lightly. It's also an incredibly powerful tool to make the players emotionally invested in the story and give them connection to their character that is not numbers. It's the main point I want to kind of hammer home here. Like, yes, Session Zero involves making character sheets and putting numbers on a page. Really, the more you can build into a character and their backstory, the more you have as a DM to pull off of to build a story with. You can customize story arcs for each player. There's kind of an art to having a story arc happen while involving the rest of the players in it, kind of simultaneously running character arcs. More experienced DMs can talk more about that. I was hoping Hippo was going to be here to talk about that. Maybe he will in the future. There's regarding this kind of knife theory thing. For example, like you said, like you're a barbarian that was part of a wiped out tribe that wants to avenge his tribe and wants to find out who wiped them out, and maybe he has somebody hunting him. That's a motivation. Motivation drives action. Action drives plot. Those are my, that's going to be my kind of mantra here. Here's some examples for other knives. Every named person your character cares about, living or dead, is a knife. Every phobia or trauma your character experiences or has experienced is a knife. Every mystery in your character's life, for example, unexplained powers or unknown parents, can be, something the DM can use to pull a character into a story. Knife. Every enemy your character has, every ongoing obligation or loyalty your character has, every obligation your character has failed, every serious crime your character has committed or been accused of. Alternatively, if your character is a serial killer or the leader of a thieves guild, those crimes can be bundled under a giant knife. Favored items, heirlooms, every secret a character has can be something that the DM can use to build a story out of. There's a page from another RPG. This is from the Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars RPG. Completely different genre. This is building into backstories, which is kind of universal. We have something called obligations. And I recently, after being exposed to the Star Wars RPG, started using obligations in D&D. Some examples of these obligations would be something like an addiction that a character has that they have to overcome, or maybe they just have... one moment. Sorry. Let's see. Yeah, a character has a strong addiction they must keep feeding, whether it's a physical addiction to stimulants, alcohol, or mental addiction such as gambling, lawbreaking, or hunting priceless antiques. The character devotes a lot of time, energy, and resources to pursuing or obtaining the object of their addiction. Avoiding this kind of obligation has withdrawal effects. It depends on the DM. Another obligation would be betrayal. Either your character was betrayed, or your character betrayed someone. Another one is blackmail. Maybe somebody has discovered one of the player character's dirty secrets and is using that knowledge for some sort of gain. You can have a bounty on the character. Your character could have a criminal record, or maybe be accused of a crime that they didn't commit. Is somehow embroiled in the legal system. Your character could be in debt, or somebody could owe a debt to your character. You could be duty bound. PC has a deep sense of duty that they feel compelled to fulfill, such as military service, making good on a contract, or following some sort of thieves' code. This is more kind of legal or ritualistic bindings to an organization or cause that make it extremely difficult or detrimental if you fail to live up to that commitment. You could have family. We talked about that before. Favor. Maybe your character owes a big favor to someone. You could have an oath. In this thing, it mentions the Jedi code, a way of living. Maybe it's an oath to a deity. Maybe it's, like the Paladin's oath, like really defines their character. And if they break the oath, then they lose power. They have to face that moral struggle. They could have an obsession. You can have an obsession with a celebrity, a region, a political movement, a cultural icon, or some other facet of society or life. The character must pursue this, possibly to the detriment of their health, finances, or well-being. You could have a responsibility. Something that they are responsible for, that they have to deal with on a frequent basis. These are all character depth dials. You can just turn them up. And actually, just yesterday, I sent that page to my... I'll put it in the chat. I sent that page to my D&D players. I'm like, okay, everybody choose 2. Then tell me about why you chose those and what your character has in their backstory that ties into them. And that got a ton of conversations going almost immediately. And suddenly, they all had backstories, but this just amplified them. Now, I, as a DM, have so many more tools to make a campaign with. We talked about knife theory, obligations. Something more whimsical and fun and open-ended is find a trinket table. Have each player roll on the trinket table. There's one in the Dungeon Master's Guide. There's one in Curse of Strahd. There's a whole bunch of other books that have trinket tables. There's online trinket tables, just random, mundane, non-magical items. Sometimes they're like very weak magical items that don't have any like crazy effect. And just the addition of a single item that has some importance to the player character and spark their inspiration. This is something I love to do in Session Zeros. It's so much fun. Just giving the most random items. Like you have a feather of a tropical bird. Okay, well, why does your character have that feather? Where did they get it from? Like they have a book that only shows the words on its page when it's dunked in water. Okay, well, what are the words on the pages? Why can it only be written or be seen underwater? Suddenly there's this mystery. The player's job is to solve some of those mysteries and help you world build through that process. It's also okay to leave some of them as mysteries, and then you as the DM have to figure something out. then you can blow the player's mind when they figure out something about that stupid little item. Maybe it's some little symbol. You can have it be this grand cosmic importance. It's a lot of fun. I love dungeon mastering. This is one of the things that I love doing.
So, if I might just twist the conversation a little bit, I personally love doing this kind of stuff, like having deep character backstories. Don't necessarily have to be complicated, but just have enough going on in them that I can pull from them, like you said, like having like knives, obligations, that sort of thing. But maybe I really like doing that, especially for homebrew games. But sometimes maybe you don't really need anything besides just a motivation. Like, do you agree with that? Like,
Absolutely, yeah.
I can't.
Also,
As an example for maybe like a homebrew game that I want to run one day, I'm totally stealing this idea wholesale. Forget where I got it from. The land is like two neighboring kingdoms sort of thing, and one kingdom is very prosperous, the other one maybe not so much, and out of kind of nowhere no, it wouldn't be out of nowhere. In the other kingdom, the less prosperous one, there's a disease spreading across the land, and the leader of that kingdom decides that the best way to treat this disease is with an experimental treatment sort of thing.
okay.
And all the players would know is the leader of the other kingdom is kidnapping people from the prosperous kingdom. They don't know that the leader of the other kingdom is doing that because he needs test subjects for his treatments, and he doesn't want to use his own people for that. Maybe some players have like an inclination towards that, but for most of them, I think just a motivation would be enough. Like,
Yeah.
aside, like, don't just say you want to do it because you like this kingdom and you don't like the leader of this kingdom and you think it's evil and bad. You know, like a little bit more than that would be good, but I don't think you need like something really deep, like my family has a history with this kingdom. We were once intertwined, and now we split ways because of a disagreement, and blah blah blah. That can be really interesting in a campaign where its focus would be on the players and their characters and their backstories. But sometimes you just want a reason to go out and adventure and do the adventure the DM has planned. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. That also kind of ties into the existence of published modules, where there is a story that's going on. There's this other big thing happening in the setting, and the world doesn't care about the players' backstories. And the DM is responsible for running this other adventure that isn't necessarily going to involve the player's backstory at all. For those kinds of things, you don't really need this huge complex backstory.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree also that you don't need it at all. It just adds to the experience.
Yeah. I will also put in again. Have you read Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden?
I have not directly, no.
Okay. I'll be starting that campaign in the new year with my friends. Now and we had our session 0 already. We just need to get out of lockdown so we can actually play the game. And Icewind Dale, what that game does is it's kind of similar to Baldur's Gate, if you've played that one. The Descent into Avernus. No, okay. Yeah.
Familiar with it.
Icewind Dale has backstory cards, I guess you could say, or like I think it calls them secret cards, like things that the player things for you to add into the player's backstory, and some of them they don't really do a whole lot. I personally split them up into two categories. There's like benign and impactful. Benign ones are like, because it's Icewind Dale, Dritz was the main character of the Crystal Shard series, so one of the cards says you're a fan of Dritz and you have a piece of his cloak after you met him one time. And it's like, it's super cute. Doesn't do anything for the backstory, but it's there and it's nice. Or
like a trinket.
Just like a little trinket sort of thing. Or you were blessed on like the day that you were born is like a blessed day in the Dale, and the goddess Oral gave you her the blessing of the Frost Maiden, and you have resistance to cold damage. That's it. That's your whole backstory. It doesn't really impact anything. Or you could have you could be a spy for the Harpers from Waterdeep, coming to Icewind Dale, and that's all the card tells you. And then it tells the DM at some point
something will happen.
Yeah, something like at some point
Spoilers.
Yeah. Sorry. Oh shoot, that's right. Sorry. Something will happen down the line to this player.
There it is. There it is.
I shouldn't say more than that. I'm in the mind of like, yeah.
We're all DMs here, but like a lot of us are like, we might play in a campaign.
Yeah. I got in the mindset that we're all DMs here, but like, you know,
a lot of the same adventures.
Point being, the way that I ran my session 0 for Icewind Dale is I said to my players, you can either have a benign backstory, the module won't really care about it, and you can leave it. The backstory is completely open for you. You can just have a simple backstory, and it won't impact your character. It won't really impact the story that much, making something nice out of it. Or you could have this super impactful thing that may or may not come up down the line. We'll see. And it's also going to shape your backstory completely. Like one of my players, the card that she pulled, I won't say for spoilers, but she had a character in mind, and then she pulled the card, and she looked at it, and she said, I can't do what I was originally going to do with this card, but I like it, so I'm going to keep it.
Right.
But as far as I know, Icewind Dale is and a bit of Baldur's Gate is an exception to the rule, in that it actually gives you some bits of backstory that allows you to implement it into your campaign and make the module care about your backstory. But what you said, for the most part, it doesn't. And sometimes that's all you need.
Right.
I've been playing Spire Peak, Dragon of Spire Peak, and it's actually quite freeing for me as a player to just show up with like a simple character whose motivation is he didn't like living in Neverwinter and he wanted to move out, and he's here in Phandalin doing stuff, and that's it. The DM doesn't have to worry about my backstory. I don't have to worry about my backstory, and that's fine.
Exactly. I had a character in a party of mine that was a wizard that had gone to wizard school and was dungeoneering because he had to pay off his student loans. That's it. You need money. You find a reason to need money, and then adventuring earns you coin. So, why do you need coin? Well, he's got loans he has to pay off for wizard school. that's fine. That's your entire character's backstory. Maybe they had a regular, reasonable upbringing, part of a middle class normal family, and they went to college, wizards, and then now they got to pay it off. That's it's whimsical. It's totally fine, totally valid. All of these things that we're discussing here are tools. They're not necessities. These are things that you can use to improve your ease of operation, the ease of improvisation during your gameplay and during your preparation for the next sessions. The more you can pull out of your characters' backstories, the more you can build on top of it. Especially for homebrew campaigns. I do want to kind of continue bouncing off of these things of existing modules. That's kind of different. Some of them have their own suggested kind of introductions for players, involving like, here's the setting, here's the current situation in the world, here's where you're going to start. It determines all of those things for you. For example, I have the Tomb of Annihilation book here, and I am part of a wonderful group of content creators on the Discord, and a few of them have made player introduction handouts. So I'm going to send one of the examples in the special events text channel. This is a player's guide. It's 3 pages for Tomb of Annihilation. It talks about like how to make a character for this setting. Talks about the setting of Chult, this jungle peninsula full of dinosaurs and undead dinosaurs, and blood-sucking, disease-bearing insects. It talks about how you travel through hexes. Talks about resting, navigation, getting a guide for the jungle, tracking resources. All of these things. It kind of sets these expectations about the setting and the way the game will be handled by the DM for the players to know. A lot of these things are kind of predetermined. When you run the adventure, there's something going on in the world the players are being involved in. They've got to deal with it. It takes a lot of the work out of the DM's job by having kind of these pre-made things, but then the DM's job is to understand them. Not just to memorize them and know what's going on. It's to understand them and understand why things are the way they are, so that their kind of living, breathing world can react and respond to the player's actions in that world. And yeah, they exist for other campaigns as well. There's Curse of Strahd, has been around a very long time. Rise of Tiamat, Horde of the Dragon Queen. People make all these kind of Session Zero handouts for these adventures, and they can be found on the subreddits, on the Discord servers for them. Pretty much every published module has a Discord server full of DMs who run those adventures. I run the Tomb of Annihilation one. I know the people who have set up most of the other ones. I have a giant list of Discord servers that have them all on there. They're also on my adventure guides page. I guess I'll post that as well. So, really quick recap of today. We're ready to kind of close it out here. I know we've been going for an hour and a half. Zoomed by. Talking about, preparing a setting. Choosing a feel for the world. Determining a starting area for the players. Talking about your table rules and table boundaries. Discussing character types, perhaps, with your players. Making characters. Determining what kind of genre the players want to be involved in. Finding a reason for characters to be in the starting location, building out character backstories, setting that groundwork to begin a campaign. That's all that Session 0 is. Setting the groundwork. Involving the player characters in a world that you are going to be running. Instead of saying, here's a character, you're in a tavern, okay, now roleplay. If you use the tools that we've gone over, if you use some of these suggestions, it's going to be far easier to transition from real life craziness going on, the fantasy world that you want to play in. So, my name is Apollonaut, or Ryan. I guess we also have another Ryan here, Luna.
And I am Luna, also Ryan.
I'm around. I run the D&D Compendium Resources website. At any point, you can ask questions about it. I hope to run more shops in the future. I think we're planning on doing I'm planning to prepare for a tabletop introduction, which is another virtual tabletop. There's room for questions now as well. Sam's gonna help me out here.
Yeah. Let's see here. Okay, everyone. If you have questions here at the close, as a reminder, just drop them in that special events text channel here, and we can cover those. Otherwise, yeah, getting some thank yous to you guys for doing this. Definitely appreciate it. Same with the Twitch viewers. If anyone's on Twitch and wants to ask a question, you can also do that. I'll be keeping an eye on the text channel there. Let's see. Hey, there we go.
What's my favorite nautical or pirate themed adventure? So I haven't played in any, I'll admit. There is Ghosts of Saltmarsh, which is like entirely based off of pirates and nautical adventures. It's like an entire book full of little mini adventures and kind of a story involved with it. It has a whole bunch of rules for boats and armaments for boats and travel speeds and all of that. That's all in Ghosts of Saltmarsh. Tomb of Annihilation has pirates in it. If you want to run pirate stuff, you can look at Tomb of Annihilation. There's like a whole pirate hideout. I don't want to give too many spoilers, but there's a thing there. A lot of DMs don't use it. I think it's cool.
My favorite is for a Pathfinder adventure called Skull and Shackles. It is D&D, but you're pirates. It introduced... Yeah, it's kind of like Ghost of Saltmarsh. It introduced ship combat into Pathfinder. I have not ran the adventure. I would like to someday. I think it's pretty cool. I love the idea of being like pirates and sailing in D&D and stuff. I have a homebrew adventure in mind that I like to run that's sort of similar. And the adventure structure is one that I quite like as well. Starts off with an introduction, gets you on a boat, gets you a boat, and then for the first half to 2/3 of the adventure, it's a sandbox. It basically says, here's a map. There's quests all over the place. There's quest hooks, plot hooks. Explore, have fun, get some levels, and that's most of the adventure. And then about the halfway mark, maybe 2/3, it switches to it says now we're going to transition from sandbox to linear adventure, and we're going to do big set pieces, big action combat, stuff like that. Icewind Dale follows a similar formula to that, and I quite like that. Like in the tier 1-ish play, you get sandbox, then once you get into tier 2, then you transition into set pieces and like dungeons, big fights, and one main story. Quite like that a lot.
Cool. Let's see here. A couple people are typing. We'll see if a question gets popped up there. The only thing I was going to mention was I really feel like there might be a good follow-up event or special event to this where we talk about maybe taking the things that you learned from a session 0 and then incorporating that into your stories moving forward, because I think you can get a lot out of a session 0, but then there's a whole question of like, how do you really use all that information, incorporate it successfully and stuff, which would be a really fascinating conversation.
That'd be a great panel. Like going from session 1, like how do you make homebrew campaign? That's such an open-ended conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Talking about weaving plot hooks into plots. Oh yeah. Something else that I've kind of covered today was to look outside of the system that you're playing for inspiration. D&D has its limitations, and it has its own content that's been released. There's so much advice out there and so many tools out there from other RPGs that can be incredibly helpful that you can just steal and pull into your homebrew campaigns.
Mm-hmm. We have a question. Strategies to use to keep yourself organized. I'm a scatterbrain. Organization is not my strong suit. There are other people more qualified to answer that question than me. The best I can say is take notes. Take a lot of notes.
I'm going to reply to Dinah here in the
Apollo,
chat.
Sam, do you have better answers to that?
So, yeah, writing everything down is a lot of work. It is recommended, but it's a lot of work, and not everybody has the time or mental energy to write everything down after a mentally taxing 4-hour session of dungeon mastering. So I linked in the chat there campaign managers. There are tools out there to help you organize everything. I use Kanka, Kanka, Kanka.io. I'm currently working on migrating everything from Kanka to Legend Keeper, because they're both phenomenal. Legend Keeper is new, and I think the only way to get access is by invite only or to submit to their Patreon, or to be a patron on their Patreon. Way that you organize information on Legend Keeper is you have an entire map of your world, and you place pins down on locations. And you click on a pin, and it gives you a whole markdown enabled panel to just type stuff about it. And it allows you to link between locations, and you can go in nested levels. You can have a map of the country, click on a section, you get to a city, click on the city, you open up, and there's all these establishments, and maybe there's a faction, maybe there's important NPCs, maybe there's a mayor. You can have all that information there, and every character can have information. You can cross-link, and it's a lot. If you really like to be granularly organized, I recommend using one of these campaign managers. Okay. One of the popular ones is World Anvil. I've found World Anvil to be overwhelming, the amount of stuff that you can put in there. It's designed to just be a catch-all world-building tool for everything from RPGs to writing books to making video games. People put all of their world information in World Anvil. It just has so much space for all of this creativity. Mm-hmm. It can feel overwhelming. I use Kanka because it's designed for RPGs specifically. And it's mobile friendly. It's free. If I have an idea while out, at a while ago, I would be at a restaurant and be like, talking about something with my friends, I would have an idea, then I'd go, okay, on my phone, and then I'd type it into Conca.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go look at it later and fill it out.
Yeah, I just linked your video too from before the D&D resource workshop that you did. That had a lot of this information covered in details. That's a great place to check too.
So true. Yeah.
Chronica
Chronica actually had a bunch of updates.
Go on.
So that's cool. Sorry.
Wait. That's okay.
I'm done. There's another tool that's equally as good.
Tina also said they're interested in learning more about creating homebrew campaigns if you guys go that route. Sam, are we planning any workshops like that?
We don't have anything scheduled right now, but that would be a great topic to cover. Absolutely.
Okay. And Chris also asks, but off topic, do you guys use any homebrew rules that you would recommend? Oh my god, I homebrew enough rules to almost call my game D&D 5.5. I will just put that there in the special events text. That is a master list of all the house rules I have compiled for my 5th edition games. For new, if I'm just running with like new players, the most I will use is light, or if I'm playing with players that I'm not familiar with, I will use light. They're really simple rules. It's a page and 1 extra page for a crit chart, and that's it. I like to use medium for my experienced players. That's like the standard that I set for myself. I have 2 variants of hero points and hero cards. When I explain that to my players, I say like for variant 1, I use that for that was my first version. I think some of the ones in there do a little bit better for sandbox games. I'm not running sandbox right now, so I made variant 2 and hero cards. I won't use both. I will either use hero points variant 2 or hero cards. Matthew Mercer's resurrection rules are in there if you're familiar with them. I do modify them a little bit. Proficiency dice isn't really a house rule. I just stole that out of the DMG and said to my players, you can do it if you like. And then at the end of that is heavy, which is that's when I would consider the heavy section to be where I start to call it 5.5e. Changing resting, changing hit points. Somebody much smarter than me, Commander Fane, posted a revised martial equipment rework, the D&D behind the screen subreddit, and I looked at that and said, this is amazing. It's a massive PDF document that completely changes martial equipment. And I made a few additions and changes to that myself. Heavy, if I ever actually do use anything in the heavy list, I won't just blanket apply it. I will ask my players, do we want to use any of the rules in heavy? So far, we're in both. We haven't decided in my Icewind Dale game yet if we're using any of the heavy rules for my Curse of Strahd game. We're using revised martial equipment and variant resting, and Death's Door because that's sort of an opt-in. But yeah, those are the rules I use that I've made.
Cool.
It's a lot in there. I don't have any document like that. A lot of the tinker, so. Yeah, I see that. My goodness. A lot of the home or kind of house rulings, I didn't really cover them in the session 0 workshop here, but I have them sort of written down. I like to determine, how are we determining stats? Are we rolling for them, or are we using the standard array? Are we doing point buy? That's a DM by DM decision that we have to make. Some DMs like to roll with natural 1s and natural 20s always having significance. But what that means for me is that there's a 10% chance of ridiculous when somebody rolls a die, which is not necessarily something that I want all the time. In the rules as written, natural 1 on an attack, all that means is you miss. Guaranteed miss. Even if you have a plus 15 to the attack, you miss. A natural 20 has its own special effects on attack rolls. On ability checks, natural 1 doesn't necessarily mean you failed. Because if you are an expert at something, you might have that plus 15 at a decently high level with expertise and some skill. With that 1, the lowest you can roll is a 16, which is pretty good. So realistically, a bard who's an expert musician is not going to just fail. I don't like using natural 1s and giving bad effects on them. So that's kind of a pattern that a lot of DMs use, and some players have kind of fallen into that expectation that if you roll a nat 1, you've failed no matter what. And I've surprised my players. I'm like, hey, no, you might not have failed spectacularly. Add your modifiers and tell me what you got. Nat 1s only apply to misses on attacks. Also, regarding that, applying another penalty, nat 1ing on an attack, hurts even more, because I think missing on the attack is punishment enough. Dealing damage to your friends is not fun.
Yeah,
martial classes that make attack rolls feel bad sometimes.
I have considered retiring my critical chart, but it's let my players all like it. My philosophy with this kind of like, if you rolled a 1, like if you rolled a 2, you're probably missed anyway. I don't run games at a high enough tier where a 2 might turn into a hit anyway. So if you roll a 2, you're going to miss anyway. Rolling a 1 doesn't change that. And it just makes the game a bit more, adds more humor to it. And like I said, my players like it. If I ask my players, hey, should we use the critical chart? I'm going to get a resounding yes. I can guarantee it. There's also the chance of rolling.
It can be fun.
Yeah, there's also that chance of rolling the 20. And one of the options on the 20 there is triple damage instead of double. You know, that's exciting. You know, you get the 20 and it's an even bigger reward. It's that, like you said, it's a 10% chance of ridiculous, and I just double down on that. I do agree with the DMG doesn't. The according to rules as written, ability checks, 1s and 20s don't necessarily mean you pass or fail.
You're like, I want to jump to the moon. Natural 20, yeah. I do it. It's like, 20. No, you're not gonna jump to the moon.
Like, I'm sorry, natural 20 is not a success, and the DC was 100.
Right, like it is impossible. So yeah, there are some things where it's like you get all these crazy stories of natural 20s, and it's like, well, there's actually just a 5% chance for that, and there's got to be a limit.
Mm-hmm. The most I'll do is if the natural 1 was like, you get a natural 1 and it's like you failed, even on a 2 you failed anyway, I'll just describe it as a little bit funnier because it's a 1, it's inherently funny. Or if you get a natural 20, I'll describe it as being a little bit more inherently awesome, but no mechanical significance to them whatsoever with ability checks.
Another homebrew kind of house rule that I do is that when a character drops to 0 HP, I give them 1 level of exhaustion.
Yeah.
Because in 5th edition D&D, it's kind of difficult to kill a character, especially if you have a, sometimes I won't do this if there is a if there's not a healer in the party. I won't give them exhaustion. If they have a way of healing, it's like, you know, a significant resource from the group, then I won't give them exhaustion. If party has a cleric, especially a life cleric, might say, okay, you get a level of exhaustion every time you drop to 0. That starts stacking up and raises the stakes.
Mm-hmm. I haven't implemented that rule in my games, only because I have not run into a situation where I've needed to. I've told my players that, you know, if I start seeing like the fighter drops to 0 and the cleric says healing word, gets him back up, fighter gets his turn in and drops, and he just keeps yo-yoing for the rest of the fight, I'm going to implement the rule because you're starting to abuse the mechanics of 5th edition. I don't like that.
Then there's Zealot Barbarians.
Yeah, I have not ran into that yet, which is why I haven't implemented the rule, but my players do know that if they start doing it, I'm going to start implementing it. Because I don't like yo-yoing.
Drop to 0. Healing word. Drop to 0. Shove a potion down his throat. It drops to 0.
Yeah.
Had that happen. So I did implement that once. I think for one battle, it was really crucial to the drama. It really upped the level in that game. I had 10 players around the table for that. I had like a cleric and a paladin, and they had several ways of healing, so it wasn't really a huge deal. They also had a way of like getting rid of exhaustion. So, I mean, greater restoration will get rid of 1 level of exhaustion. Mm-hmm. I made them use resources to take care of it. Cool. Something else. Banning content. We didn't talk about this. DMs, a lot of the time, know about why content is banned. Some DMs are like, okay, I only allow stuff in the books. Published books by Wizards of the Coast. You can use anything from there. And even then, you know, run it by me. You want to play. If a player shows up at my table and says, I want to play a half demon mystic that has 3 magic items and this ability to cast fireball at will, I'm going to be like, no, that's not happening. And they go, but I already had character art made. I'm like, it's too bad.
Yeah.
It's too ridiculous. There's no way they're going to fit in the group. Some DMs are fine with allowing their player characters to build whatever character they want. Sure, you want to play it like a pixie paladin wielding a tiny longsword. That can be pretty whimsical and funny. It's just not part of the normal like player experience at a D&D table. Or it's like, I want to play a centaur. Well, what are you going to be able to go upstairs? Are you going to be able to squeeze into a house? How are you going to be in a dungeon as a centaur? So, I mean, you have limitations, and some DMs just outright ban content that they don't feel like they want to deal with. One of the common ones is flying characters. Things like Aarakocra, the race that just has wings. Azamar, which are like fallen angels.
Yeah.
Sometimes
DMs are half celestials. They're like tieflings, but celestials instead of fiends.
Right. Yeah, there's also like the flying tiefling variant from the DMG. Mm-hmm. The way that I run it is I allow my players to choose those races with wings, but I say you cannot fly. You can have all of the other characteristics of the race, but you cannot fly. Flying breaks a lot of things at early levels. Considering the spell Fly is a 3rd level spell that requires concentration, it has a duration. Being able to passively fly anywhere is incredibly hard for a DM to deal with at early levels. Of course, there are ways of grounding a flying character. Ranged attacks, they have no cover up in the air. But
then they feel
okay, no.
targeted. Yeah.
Right.
I have a similar rule, not for flying characters. My idea with it is like, I'll come back to that in a moment. For content specifically, PHB, fine, just take it, no worries. Published books, I'm okay with as long as you show me the book. Homebrew, third party, and Unearthed Arcana needs my approval. And the only thing that at my table that's banned is Mystic, because it's Unearthed Arcana, and I can just say, don't even ask me to play. If you want to play Mystic, I'm not going to allow it, because you will invalidate the rest of the party.
Adding 12 pages of rules to the system.
Yeah.
Not something I want to deal with as a DM.
And I have not banned anything else outright. Like, I've outright banned Mystics, but I feel like that's up to based on my own rules, that's up to my own discretion. I can just say, don't ask me. I have not banned anything else. I was considering banning flying characters, like you said, like the Akakra, the certain Asimar, and I was this close to banning the Twilight Domain from Tasha's, because I took one look at that and I said, no, I don't like that. 300-foot Dark Vision at level 1. Oh. And level 2 Channel Divinity, you create a bubble around you that sheds dim light, I think. I think it makes light. And the big one is, though, anyone in this bubble, every round gets temporary HP for a minute. I thought about it, and I said, you know what? I'm not going to ban it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do what I do with power gamers, because I've had power gamers in my games before. I ran a Pathfinder, Adventure, Steampunk, and basically I had 2 characters in power armor that I couldn't hit because their AC was like 30-something, which for 5th edition is ridiculous. Pathfinder is ridiculous. Yeah, it's like at that point you're basically untouchable in 5th edition, and in Pathfinder, like you're really big. But even in Pathfinder, that's a really massive AC. And we had a variant rogue that had D8s that contextually had D8 sneak attack dice. Yeah. Normally, her sneak attack dice was for D4s, but she had to use acrobatics to move vertically up or down 10 feet and then get a regular sneak attack proc off. Thematically it worked, and between those 3 characters, we had 2 of them that I couldn't touch, and one of them who was a rogue, so I'm already untouchable, and also dealt massive damage. I said, you know what, this is fine. I'll just make the encounters like deadly, and it'll be balanced for them. And that's my idea of balancing, like, flying characters and the stupid Twilight Domain. I'm going to tell my players, okay, you're by flying or by taking this domain, this subclass, you're going to be extremely powerful. I'm going to make the game much harder for you. You are opting into this, and I'm letting you know now. Do you want to go down this path? And if they say yes, I'll say, great. That's fine. You've made the game. And as long I wouldn't just say just to that one player. Like, if there's one player that says, I'm going to play Twilight Domain, and I'm going to say to everyone, this domain is overpowered, the entire game for everyone is going to get harder because of this person. Are you all okay with this? And if everyone says yes, all of the Twilight Domain, and I'll say, great, level 1, you're fighting an owlbear.
Sure. Yeah, so if a power gamer comes in and builds a super optimized character, then yeah, it's kind of asking for the DM to have license to up their level as well.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like it feels bad when a player comes in power gaming and building a super optimized character that can do a lot of stuff in combat specifically, on kind of springing that on a new DM. It's hard to deal with.
Yeah.
We're going to kind of wrap this up. The other thing, I completely banned D&D Wiki. That's kind of a meme among DMs, as we say, if you find anything from D&D Wiki, we are not allowing it at the table. Just because it's a wiki, anybody can edit it. It's all homebrew. D&D Wiki is the spot for people to post homebrew where they're not professional and not posting on the DMs Guild. Kind of like where people practice their homebrew before they actually publish content on the DMs Guild.
Mm-hmm.
If you want good homebrew, go look on the DMs Guild and pay $1 or $2 pages of good stuff.
Mm-hmm. It's the Wild West.
Or go to the Reddit Unearthed Arcana.
Mm-hmm.
That's
cool.
I think we've covered a lot today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you all for being here and listening to us ramble.
Yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks Apollonaut and Luna for taking your time and doing this, sharing your wisdom. Really appreciate it.
Bigger thanks to Apollonaut. He was the one taking the initiative and leading this whole thing.
My pleasure.
Well, thanks, guys.
Thank you for bouncing ideas around.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me here. Been a lot of fun.
Cool.
Indeed.
Well, as I mentioned, this was streamed on Twitch, so there will be a copy then transferred from there to YouTube. If you want to catch a section again or whatever you want to do. We'll get some links in the video description like usual, so if there's something mentioned or whatever, we can do a big dump of links in there. Otherwise, a lot of it was posted in our Discord server in the special events text channel. Apollonaut and Luna are in the Discord server and on Discord quite a bit. So, I mean, if they're open to it, you can, if there's follow-up questions or anything you want to ask, feel free to do that. But I think that's everything else. So yeah, once again, thanks to everyone watching. Thanks to our speakers here, and keep an eye out for future special events. Otherwise, have a great day, and we'll catch you all next time.
Indeed. Happy adventuring.
Have a good one, everyone.
All right, see ya.